Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Those are the words of the famous Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the most important figures to study and commemorate, and let me tell you why. It's important that people study MLK and understand why he's important because his overall theme of love, his ingenious speeches, and his ability to appeal to more than one person is what makes him an absolutely important figure for everybody to study. First, I will explain MLK's educational background, then I will explain his significance on the civil rights movement, and then I will explain his ability to appeal to all members of society. First, let me explain his background. Being the son of a Baptist minister, King immediately became educated in both religion and writing. He quickly pursued a doctorate in theology and would already be organizing his first major speech and protest by 1955 for the Montgomery bus boycott with Rosa Parks. King really looked up to Gandhi, and this was his major figure, and that's the main reason as to why all of King's protests were nonviolent, because he studied Gandhi, and Gandhi's main theme was nonviolent protests. And this was a main theme for the civil rights movement, which is really what made it powerful and garnered it a lot of attention. King was now a force to be reckoned with. He was very eloquent, very educated, and he had created a movement that was going to change the world forever. Now that I've told you about his background, let me explain why King was so significant to the civil rights movement. King's assistance with the Montgomery bus boycott was critical for its success because Rosa Parks was enough to get the boycott going, but MLK had his people in his church and the people he already knew to preach the injustice to, and so he gave it the fame and attention that it really needed for the boycott to take off, and that's why it was successful. Also, King's famous I Have a Dream speech, where he presented his speech in front of 250,000 people in front of the Lincoln Memorial, was also one of the most important speeches to ever be delivered on this earth because it just affected so many lives at the time and future lives to come. And this was the finale of the civil rights movement. With King's help, the poll tax was abolished, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibited public discrimination, and these were really big wins for the African American community at the time. Now that I've explained his significance to the civil rights movement, let me explain why he was so appealing to all members of society. King's message and movement was so successful because he studied Gandhi, like I said, and Gandhi's teachings of nonviolent retaliation were ingenious at the time when the opposing side was very angry and violent and using weapons and just being very brutish. And when you fight something so violent with complete nonviolence, it sends a way greater message than the other side senselessly beating the other side. And so King did not want to be greater than anyone. He strictly wanted to be equal, and he explicitly stated this all the time. African Americans did not want to become greater than anybody. They strictly wanted to become equal. And white people had to now question their religion and their morals and their whole race because King, as a religious person, was preaching to their ideals of religion, and when they contradicted themselves, they had to start questioning, is what I'm doing right or is what I'm doing wrong? And that's where they had to make the decision whether they're going to continue to be bigoted or start to educate themselves and treat people nicer. King's messages of love created a movement that now had all types of people supporting his message. Now that I've explained why he's so important to study and commemorate, let me conclude. King is important because he was able to fight through the hate and create a universal movement that many people supported. He united the world at a time when it didn't seem like it was possible to unite. He used his messages of positivity to spread his gospel, and by the words of King himself, the time is always right to do what is right.